Greetings to those who watch below. Today we are going to be taking a look at some very strange close encounters where people have had experiences with some of the weirdest alien creatures out there. But before we start, I'd like to say thank you to Steffi Ray, Lefty Kim, M.A. Way, Julie B, Chris BLK Chris, Tegan S, Tesos Keramaris, LT Punisher 666, Wicked Witch, Christina Groves, Canopsia, and Lisa Watts. They are those who dwell below, an exclusive channel membership that gets you shoutouts at the start of every video. Also, you can find me on Instagram at brimstone_below and on Facebook at the Brimstone Below Horror Channel. And as always, I'm there creeping away on creepypasta.com. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. The Pacienca Abductors. The Pacienca sighting is an extraterrestrial sighting and abduction case that took place on September 15, 1977, in the town of Pacienca, Brazil. The witness was a 33-year-old bus driver named Antonio Larrubia. Antonio encountered a huge object, which he estimated to be 235 feet across, or 70 meters, sitting in a field near his home. He decided to retreat from the object, but was unable to do so, for at the moment he started to run, an intensely bright light lit up the area, and he was unable to move. At that moment, Antonio saw 3 robots positioned near him. He was captured and taken into the disc. The creatures were 1 meter 40 centimeters, about 4 feet tall, but their antennae, which jutted out of the middle of their heads, extended far enough to extend beyond his height, which is about 5'5". The heads of the creatures were shaped like American footballs, with a band extending across the middle horizontally, which looked like a row of small mirrors of a blue shade, one a little darker than the others. The bodies, Antonio said, were stocky, the trunk broader than his own. He was muscular but of slender build. They had appendages for arms which he compared to elephants' trunks, and which were narrowed down to pointed tips, resembling 1 finger. Their bodies were made of a rough substance resembling scales. Antonio, when questioned, said he didn't think the scales were armour, for the robots moved around freely and the scales did not seem to impede them in any way. The trunks were rounded at the bottom, ending in a single leg. Antonio's first impression was that they were sitting on something, but didn't feel this to be the case. This leg ended in a platform the size and shape of a saucer. Antonio compared this leg and platform to the stools utilised on ships. All of this outer part of the bodies looked like a dull shade of aluminium. Antonio says he was able to knock out the creatures by yelling at them, which thus allowed him to escape his ordeal. The Kofu Fanged Humanoids. In 1975, 2 7-year-old boys had a face-to-face encounter with a pair of fanged humanoids, which would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Sometime before 7 p.m, on the evening of February 23, 1975, 2 grade school boys, Masato Kawano and Katsuhiro Yamahata, were roller skating near the Hinode housing estate in Kamamachi, Kofu, Japan, when they noticed a pair of glittering orange UFOs frolicking in the skies above. The enthralled boys stared in awe as the larger of the 2 objects broke off and flew towards Mount Otago, while the smaller one slowly descended to the ground, landing amongst the props of a vineyard behind the estate. The boys later stated that the strange aerial objects emitted an odd crackling or ticking sound, not unlike that of a Geiger counter. It goes without saying that the curious youngsters wasted no time in removing their skates and charging into the vineyard in order to get a better look at this new earthbound object. As the 2 second graders approached the formerly orange spacecraft, they saw that it was actually a domed, silverish disc, which stood approximately 7 feet high and was almost 15 feet in diameter. This classically shaped flying saucer was perched on 3 ball-shaped legs, and had what the children described as strange characters embossed on the metallic surface of its hull. While inspecting the craft, both Kawano and Yamahata were astounded, and no doubt a bit frightened, to see a hatch open on the side of the craft and a ladder automatically extend down to the ground below. The boys watched in stunned silence as a bizarre humanoid creature disembarked from the ship. It was at that moment that the boys noticed another, smaller though similar looking humanoid remained inside the control room. Kawano and Yamahata reported that the first creature was long-armed, almost 4 feet tall, and was clad in a glowing or reflective silver uniform. Unlike the Kinnula Humanoid, more on that in a moment, the Kofu entity's skin was described as being dark brown and covered in wrinkles so dense that they obscured any noticeable features, save 3 2-inch long metal fangs. This strange alien sightseer apparently began to explore the terrain, seemingly oblivious to the enthralled duo staring at it. That was, until it abruptly turned and placed one of its hands on Yamahata's shoulder, patting him twice and uttering a series of sounds that sounded to the boys like a tape recorder running backwards. At this point, Yamahata collapsed to the ground paralysed. Although his friend believed that this was caused by fear, anyone familiar with so-called close encounters of the third kind can attest that human beings are often placed in a state of almost suspended animation by extraterrestrial visitors, in what one must assume is an effort to prevent them from hurting themselves or anyone else. As soon as Yamahata dropped, Kawano rapidly pulled up his friend onto his shoulders and lugged him away from these vampiric alien assailants as quickly as possible. Upon returning home, the now almost hysterical boys immediately informed their mothers about this bizarre close encounter. Their curious and probably incredulous mothers followed their sons to the back of the Hinodi housing estate, where, much to their shock, they confirmed seeing an orange light pulsating in the vineyard. This odd light show continued for 5 minutes, before the boys could convince their mothers to investigate the strange craft at a closer range. Then, the UFO launched with a burst of light so brilliant, the eyewitnesses were compelled to avert their eyes. It should be noted that while Yamahata and Kawano were the only ones to have actually seen the aliens, their classmate, 8-year-old Ichiro Minagishi, also reported that he saw a shining object flying towards the Hinodi housing estate while he was riding in a car with his parents near the Kofu bypass, approximately 1/2 hour before the boys claimed to have discovered the UFO. The following day, the boys had captivated the audience of students and teachers at their local school, as they drew pictures and retold the tale of their alien encounter. It wasn't long before the buzz enveloped the entire school, and the educational authorities decided that they would inspect the area for themselves. The school officials arrived armed with whatever gear they could get hold of and immediately noticed that 2 solid concrete posts had been pushed over at the landing site. It was determined that the boys would have been unable to accomplish this task of vandalism on their own. This investigative team also found what they referred to as landing traces, as well as a ring pattern in the soil near the broken concrete posts where the UFO landed. One schoolteacher even claimed to have discovered radioactivity within the circular patch. Following the event, both boys were questioned in depth by their parents, their schoolmaster, and noted UFO investigator Masaru Mori. Their stories remained alarmingly consistent. Unsurprisingly, the authorities of the Civil Aviation Bureau of Transportation Ministry claimed that the UFO was nothing more than the lights of the YS-2 propeller plane, which often flew at an altitude of 1,000 meters and was visible to the naked eye. They apparently reserved comment as to whether or not this aircraft could also assume the form of small, pointy-eared, fanged humanoids. The Kinnula Humanoid. In 1971, two lumberjacks were astounded to see a strange UFO landing in a forest clearing, but it wasn't until a small, green suit-covered humanoid descended from the ship that things got really out of hand. On February 2nd, 1971, at about 8 p.m, two Finnish women, Sinikka Kuitunen and one Mrs. Manninen, were driving from Kuusamo towards Oulu, in a region near Kiminki, where they spied a strange light behind their car on the right side of the road. After a few moments, this mysterious light slipped over the vehicle and began to pace the car on the left side of the road. Kuitunen, who was driving, claimed that as the UFO passed by, their ears began to mysteriously plug up. When the pair arrived at a nearby field, the light abruptly disappeared. That is when both women claim to have caught a glimpse of the unbelievable. The women later insisted that they had seen a peculiar, helmeted creature that stood approximately 3 feet tall. They both agreed that this enigmatic entity was clad in a greenish-brown suit and crossed the road in front of them in a series of small jumps. This odd being swiftly disappeared on the far side of the road, which the women confirmed was a desolate area with no buildings or houses. Kuitunen, whose fear far outweighed her curiosity, hit the gas and sped directly toward the city of Oulu. Neither woman seemed interested in investigating the matter any further. As fascinating as this incident was, this would not be the last, nor the most frightening encounter that human beings would have with this enigmatic entity. The incident that made this alien being famous occurred on the snowy, overcast afternoon of February 5th, 1971. On this day, two lumberjacks, 21-year-old Petter Aliranta and 18-year-old Esko Juani Snek, had a close encounter that would haunt them for the remainder of their lives. The event began at about 3 p.m, when the two, who had spent the morning cutting down trees in the forest near the village of Kangaskila, decided to call it a day because the overcast conditions were making it too dark to continue. According to their account, Aliranta had just turned off his chainsaw when he suddenly noticed an odd metallic object hovering at treetop level. He claimed it was shaped like two saucers on top of each other and was about 15 feet in diameter. At the bottom of the vehicle there were 4 thin landing legs with rounded bases, which he estimated to be more than 6 feet long. If the craft made any sound, it was no doubt overwhelmed by the roaring of Snek's chainsaw. Aliranta continued to watch as a circular portal opened at the base of the slowly descending ship. Within moments, the object landed in a small clearing between the trees less than 50 feet away. Aliranta stared in amazement as a weird, green-garbed entity slowly descended through the open platform from the bowels of the craft. He later described this entity as being less than 3 feet in height, with its entire body covered in a green one-piece suit. On the front of the head was a faceplate that was described as being like that of a scuba diver. Although the creature had arms and legs, the suit gave no indication of hands or fingers. The structure of this suit seems to be like that of deep-sea suit divers, where they were there to protect them from the pressure of the ocean's most severe depths. Perhaps this alien was wearing something similar, as the pressure of Earth's surface may be harmful to creatures like itself. While this is pure speculation, there is still the possibility that this is true. This spaceman seemed to defy gravity as it floated down the 6 feet to the snow-covered ground below the ship. It was then, much to Aliranta's alarm, that this creature began to approach him. To the lumberjack's surprise, the being did not sink into the snow, but continued toward him with short, stiff gliding movements, akin to that of an astronaut skipping on the moon. Aliranta described the motion as almost robotic, but perhaps its movements were just inhibited by the suit it was wearing. At that moment, Aliranta, who was terrified, started his chainsaw. Snack, who was still focused on cutting branches off a felled tree, had not noticed the UFO or the alien. He turned at the roar of the chainsaw and saw the shocked expression on his friend's face, as well as the tiny alien oddity that was galloping toward them. The lumberjack, with what must have been a jolt of youthful bravery, advanced upon the humanoid as Snack watched dumbfounded. Aliranta and the alien were less than 30 feet apart, when the entity abruptly turned and started back towards the saucer with the same loping gait. This further emboldened Aliranta, who now ran in pursuit of the little green man. When he got closer to the UFO, Aliranta claimed to have noticed other vaguely humanoid figures through 3 windows on the top side of the vehicle. When the alien was just 9 feet away from the craft, it levitated into the air in an odd fashion, floating towards the opening from which it had come. Just as the humanoid had ascended to about 3 feet in the air, Aliranta lunged and grabbed hold of the heel of the being's right boot with his bare hand. It was then that he was overcome with a flash of pain as the material of the creature's suit burned like a hot iron. The wounds caused by the contact with the boot were, according to reports, still visible 2 months later. Aliranta leapt backwards, allowing the entity to glide back to its ship. The moment the alien disappeared into the saucer, it began to emit a soft buzzing sound. The craft slowly started to ascend off the ground with what was described as a weak gust of air, but no smoke or scents were evident. As the saucer rose skyward, the circular portal at the bottom closed, and within 15 seconds, the UFO had disappeared into the atmosphere. Following the UFO's departure, both Aliranta and Snack claimed that they were unable to talk and had difficulty moving for nearly an hour following the harrowing event. The only evidence that remained of their bizarre encounter was the rounded prints the saucer had left in the snow. Michelin Men. Michelin Men, or balloon men, are a type of possible extraterrestrial that has been reported on a rare number of occasions throughout the world. These entities were dubbed with the names Michelin Man and Balloon Man because of their similarity in appearance to the popular Michelin Man mascot. In May 1960, Antonio Ribera was at a crossroads between Arcos de la Frontera and El Bosque, both towns in the province of Cadiz, Spain. He was returning from a motorcycle trip when he saw a strange human-like being about 500 feet away on a short, steep uphill incline of the highway that was ahead of him. He described the being as follows. He was completely red from head to foot, and suddenly appeared at the edge of the highway. Rather tall, something like 2 meters, 6 to 7 foot, or more. It had trouble walking, and his walking was like a mechanical doll. That is to say, like a robot with stiff arms. After stopping his motorcycle, he saw the humanoid was walking on the edge of the road, and before going 6 steps, another individual of similar characteristics appeared and followed him. Like his predecessor, he appeared suddenly. The second humanoid was not so tall, as he measured about 3'11", and though he was also dressed in red, he had one difference to his predecessor. He had a black boot. Ribera could not remember if the boot was on the left or the right foot, but he says that he saw it like that. The humanoids then crossed the highway at an angle, and Ribera saw the ridged outlines of the beings, with the classic shape of the Michelin Man. Ribera decided to get closer. Upon reaching the curve in the highway to head toward the slope where the humanoids were, they had disappeared in the same mysterious manner that they had appeared. Another incident occurred on Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean between Mauritius and Madagascar. In an area known as La Plaine de Caf, a similar sighting was made on July 31st, 1968. It was around 9 AM in the morning, and a local farmer named M. Fontaine reported the following event. I was at the 21-kilometre mark in a small clearing in the middle of a forest of acacia trees. I was bending down picking some grass for my rabbits when I suddenly saw a sort of oval-shaped cabin in the clearing. It was 25 meters from me, and as though suspended at a height of 4 to 5 meters from the ground. The extremities of it were a dark blue, the centre part lighter, more transparent, rather like the windscreen of a Peugeot 404. Above and below it had what looked to be 2 glass feet of shining metal. In the centre of the cabin were 2 individuals with their backs towards me. The one on the left turned right around to face me. He was standing, small, about 90 centimeters in height, enveloped from head to feet in a sort of one-piece overall, a bit like the suit worn by the Michelin Man. The one on the right simply turned his head round towards me, but all the same I had time to catch a glimpse of his face, which was partly masked by some sort of helmet. They then turned their backs to me, and there was a flash as strong as the electric arc of a welding machine. Everything went white around me. A powerful heat was giving off, and then, as it were, a sort of blast of wind. A few seconds later, there was nothing there anymore. I approached the spot of which the object had been. There were no marks. The object was of a bluish colour, with white on the upper and lower parts. I told my wife all about it, and then the gendarmerie, and everyone at once believed me. On March 14th, 1976, Vincent and Carmen Corral, a married couple, were driving along small roads in Spain's Castellan region. At about 10 p.m, the couple found themselves noticing strange phenomena in the night sky, and reported a white oval that floated to the left of their car. Believing at first that it might be the headlights of a car on a nearby hill, the Corrals only made it a few hundred feet before they believed they were driving into a luminous tornado of sorts, as an object appeared to rise out of the ground. Bathing the object in the car's high beams, Mr. Corral was startled to see that it was a person. I suppose that it had 2 legs, because it reminded me of a human profile. However, since the legs, were so close together, it looked more like a column than a human being. The thing was tall, good-looking, and wore a close-fitting, one-piece suit. The couple's initial fascination changed to fear as their Renault's lights suddenly went out, leaving them in pitch blackness. The smell of burning wires soon filled the car, and Corral was forced to pull over. While all this happened, the entity vanished into the darkness. Vincent and Carmen Corral, their car's electrical system ruined, were left to wonder what had happened. Hi guys, thank you so much for listening to today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like, and also if you want more alien encounters, please feel free to let me know. I will be very, very happy to carry on researching these strange encounters. So, until next time, sleep tight.